I'm so happy to be joined here today with Lisa and Catherine, my colleagues. We're hoping to offer you some specific tools and strategies to implement your professional development at the school or district level. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. And with that, we'll jump right into it. So within the reopening guidelines, there was section 10 titled Professional Development Considerations. And in subsection B, they specifically called out social emotional learning and also trauma-informed instruction. Trauma-informed instruction we're going to cover in a separate section, so be sure to check for that on our YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to specifically talk about social emotional learning. And here, I just gave a brief highlight of what the topic really covered, but the STRRT teams recommended that districts should be prepared to address a wide range of mental health, social emotional wellness needs of not just their students, but also their staff when they're reopening schools. We've all gone through a tremendous experience with remote learning and COVID-19, and we want schools and districts to be well prepared to address these needs. The recommendations also called out having professional development spread across the year, not just delivering this professional development at the beginning of the year and hoping it sticks, but really addressing it throughout the course of the year to integrate it into your culture and climate of your district and your school. And in that same spirit, any professional development that you provide, we would hope that it's able to be integrated into the daily practice of your staff and your students. So when you're thinking about professional development, think about honing in on something very specific that would be applicable to your staff. When we're thinking about professional development, and the guidance calls it out as well, you don't want to provide a wide array of professional development topics. You want to hone in on one or two specific topics that would support the whole child and really have them master those skills before you move on to a different topic. The recommendations also encourage you to leverage community health partners and inventory your local resources. So thinking about what partners out there within your community can help address student trauma, social emotional well-being, and mental health. And I'll dig into some of those local, state, and national partnerships throughout this presentation. And then finally, the recommendations encourage you to organize and systematize a referral process and resources to support teachers. So when teachers do identify a student that's at risk or a family that's in need of supports, they know exactly how to request assistance or provide these resources. So here, this presentation and how we move forward is going to really give you concrete steps in support of these recommendations. But before we move on, I just want to ask my colleagues that I have here, Lisa and Catherine, I'm curious why you think the recommendations called out professional development specific to social emotional learning.
I think that's a really good question, and it's really interesting, and it also speaks to some of the strengths that we have within the state of New Hampshire and some of the understanding that the law provides about how children learn, how children of all ages learn. And we're specifically in New Hampshire, we're told that we have to address wellness, student wellness, as part of minimum standards. So I think with these unprecedented times with COVID and uncertainty about how we're going to be reopening, and trauma in students and trauma in educators, I think there's a lot of positive recognition that this is critical to the success of our academic endeavors. So we need to address both if we want students and teachers to be well prepared to move into the next academic year.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Lisa. And I would just add too, with the trauma of the pandemic, it's more important than ever for schools to really double down on their efforts to address the social and emotional needs of students who may have had a variety of experiences that were very out of their control as we head into the next school year. I also just wanted to say for folks who are watching, Molly is going to be sharing a bunch of resources. And as she does so, I'm going to put links, hyperlinks in the chat where available so that you will be able to access all the resources provided here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa and Catherine, and also for putting those links in the description. We will also have this presentation publicly posted, so you can find them there too. But we just want to connect you as many ways as possible. But I just wanted to close the loop on including professional development around SEL. I think, Lisa, you're absolutely right. It is one of the strengths of New Hampshire is that we really prioritize mental health and social emotional well-being in our students. And I want to encourage people to expand that knowledge to think about how we can promote it in our staff and our families as well too. Thank you. So before we dig into the resources, I just want to give a really high level overview of social emotional learning. This is taken from CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. They break it down into 5 competencies that you see there in orange, yellow, and green. And when you're thinking about these SEL competencies, they include the 3 blue rings. So in the classroom, you can develop the SEL competencies through curriculum and direct instruction, modeling from teachers. In the middle blue ring, you can build these competencies through school-wide practices and policies. So having your school culture and climate reflect these competencies, demonstrating responsible decision-making in the school level is one way to build these competencies. And then the final outer ring is really where we're going to dig in today, developing these competencies through family and community partnerships. We want to encourage these partnerships so that students see SEL competencies, not just in their day in the classroom, but throughout all of their life experiences. So when we're thinking about social emotional learning and professional development, the recommendations, like I stated earlier, encourage you to infuse it throughout the year. And even if you're going back to school in person this fall, there's a chance that we might have to move to a hybrid or a completely remote learning experience. So I want to encourage you to think about any professional development that you're taking on this year. Seriously think about how you can adapt it to be virtual or hybrid model. There is a link that I'm going to share at the end. It's for West Ed, and they have strategies for infusing these types of mental health professional developments into a virtual learning environment. So when we're thinking about strategies for professional development, for educators, it's pretty straightforward. You can have virtual or in-person coaching sessions with your educators, webinars. I'm going to share some learning modules that are kind of modeled after an online college course. But when you're thinking about, you don't really offer professional development for students or families, but we do want to support them in the growth of their SEL. So you can have them participate in small groups, participate in the SEL instruction itself. And then we want to equip families with the knowledge around, what to look for when they're thinking about maybe their child's experiencing trauma or SEL development that's developmentally appropriate for their child. That was a brief overview. Please tune in for future sessions where we're going to dig deeper into those topics because they really require a lot more discussion.
Molly, can I just interject very quickly? I know in your professional development slides, we're thinking, many of us think professional development is one thing, that we all sit in a room together, we have someone talk to us at the front, like a lecture, didactic. Maybe there's a group activity, we apply what we have learned, and we all feel really good that we've achieved it. We might earn a CEU or something like that. But I think it's really important to emphasize that in moving forward, professional development models will need to be changed to meet the different formats. So we're all comfortable with the face-to-face format. Some of us are becoming more comfortable with hybrid, but when we get to remote professional development, I think that's where many of us are unsure. And I think it's really important to remember that although there is a lot of chatter about online or remote not being as effective. It's actually just as effective, and in some cases even more effective than our face-to-face professional development. So we should all keep an open mind as we experience professional development that might be delivered online or in a hybrid version, and be aware that with the right attitude and the right positive feelings about it, it can probably be as effective, if not more effective, than traditional, didactic at the front of the room type of development experiences.
Thank you so much for adding that in. Absolutely. When we're thinking about being in person, completely remote, or a hybrid model, I know personally there's a lot of questions. How is that going to look? How is the content going to be delivered? So thank you so much for highlighting that here. When we're thinking about other, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think too, as districts think about how they're planning to deliver professional development, having that flexibility, but also becoming more well-versed in the different modalities or formats will make it easier, right? So if you plan for having to do virtual, but it turns out that you're able to do in person, it's easier to kind of switch back and forth if you're planning for all scenarios. And we know that that's a heavy lift initially, but once it's done, it will be easier to maintain throughout the year.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people were hesitant about remote learning, and even in the professional worlds, people were saying, well, this job can't be done remote. And I think a lot of us are learning that with some experience and a little perseverance, we're able to get creative and get these things to work more efficiently. So thank you. Other considerations that always come up when we're thinking about delivering professional development within a district or school. One of them specifically is funding. So I highlighted 2 federal opportunities for funding. The CARES Act highlighted the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund grant. So subsection D10 has some specific language around using funds for professional development. So I want to encourage you to access those. This right here is a hyperlink to the website. And then below that, Every Student Succeeds Act has existed for quite a few years now, but they have the Title I funds for specifically funding evidence-based programming in SEL. So if you're looking to purchase a SEL curriculum that's evidence-based, you can look there to provide some funds for that. Title II Part A provides professional development funding, and then Title IV Part A provides funding for whole child efforts. And oftentimes SEL falls right into that category because social emotional learning does address the needs of the whole child. Another consideration when thinking about professional development is how you're going to communicate this. I want districts and schools to be thinking about how your social emotional learning opportunities will be communicated out, not just to your students and staff, but to the families and the larger community. We want to think about how the SEL practices that we're adopting can be integrated into all aspects of a student's experience. And then finally, thinking about quality improvement. If you're going to be putting funds into this SEL initiative, we want you to be thinking about how you'll know that the social emotional learning strategies are benefiting your students, your staff, and your community.
Molly and Catherine, as we look at this slide, I'm wondering, how can you tell that if an SEL strategy is actually providing a benefit?
That's a great question. Oftentimes I think SEL and some other initiatives can kind of just seem like, people implement them and then they just hope for the best and with all good intentions implement, but they're not sure if it's actually reaping the benefits that were promised. So, taking a school climate survey, a teacher survey to ask their perceptions of the social emotional layout that exists at baseline, and then taking those surveys again later in the year or the following year is one way to kind of gauge benefits. Catherine, can you think of any other ways?
Yeah, I think you really spoke to the main way, which is really making sure that you're doing a baseline evaluation followed up by an evaluation later on in the year that that evaluates how the program's working, and having someone in the building who can monitor the fidelity with which the program is being implemented, right? So if all the teachers got a PD at the beginning of the year about a new curriculum, but then weren't really checked in with about it later on, or there was no recurring professional development, it's easy for that to just get lost in the shuffle. So maintaining that fidelity at the school level, having a point person to help do that maybe. And also just thinking about different evidence-based curricula or programs. Many of them come with their own fidelity tool or evaluation system that comes if you purchase the curriculum. So those are built in and can be done. But I think for us, when we work with schools, we usually really try to encourage that point person who can help monitor and evaluate the program, so it's not just another initiative that falls by the wayside. Good question though, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I think too, when we're thinking about having specific data around quality improvement, that helps garner buy-in. Not always is the entire school staff bought into an SEL curriculum or another type of initiative. So being able to show, market change in a school culture or climate, or improvement in SEL skills and strategies would definitely help garner buy-in with those types of folks. So thank you for that. All right, moving on. This is a direct quote from the guidance, and it really highlights a few things that we've bolded here for you. Leveraging the knowledge and relationships of community, inventory of the local resources, creating a list of these resources, and finding appropriate supports in a coordinated way. And I wanted to bold out these words here to then move us to the next slide, which is an overview of MTSSB. So here at the New Hampshire Bureau of Student Wellness, we work to implement MTSSB, which we boil down to organizing people, analyzing data, to make a plan, to implement strategies, and to evaluate outcomes. So when we're thinking back to that previous slide about, the local community assets that exist, that's really that falls right into organizing people. We're thinking about organizing not just our school staff and our families, but we want to engage local community partners, community mental health, sometimes juvenile justice programs, the police, the local police department often have a great voice in these types of organizational strategies. Analyzing data is taking that, the baseline like we were just talking about, to make sure that we are headed in the right direction when we pick an SEL curriculum or other types of strategies. We make a plan, implement, and then evaluate. We go back to that data and see if we're actually having a market improvement on quality instruction and quality engagement with our students. So I just wanted to highlight and call out the specific ways that the recommendations really align pretty nicely with the MTSSB model that we use here in the New Hampshire Department of Education. So the first resources that I'm going to call out are the resources created by us at the Office of Social Emotional Wellness. We have created this YouTube channel, which you've found if you're here watching us right now. We partner, not just among ourselves to do these kind of roundtable discussions, but we partner with local and national organizations to provide you resources and other types of great learning opportunities there on our YouTube page. And then we have our resource website, nhlearnsremotely.com, where you can find plenty of resources that we link to you and we also create ourselves. So we encourage you to check those out. And then moving to local resources. So when we're thinking about local resources, we have our New Hampshire mental health regions broken out here, your community mental health partners. I know it's a little tough to see on the screen, but they exist within regions. So if you were living in Concord, here in Region 4, you would be reaching out to Riverbend to access your resources. And I'm just curious to my colleagues if they have any ideas as to why they think it's so important that we're really engaging these community mental health partners when we're thinking about social emotional learning in schools.
I think we know in education at all levels and all grades that we're very strong in academic content delivery, but we don't necessarily have all the supports and all the information and all the available resources to focus on SEL for all of our students and all of the populations and all of our diversity. And these local resources have got so much to offer with fully trained and educated professionals that we might not have within a school or a school district. And they are hungry to work with us. I mean, it's important to remember that when we reach out to them, that meets their mission, it meets their goals and objectives, and they're here to support us. So we should collaborate and reach out and take advantage of what they would like to give us.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, thinking about what you said and reflecting on that a little bit, I think oftentimes educators know, when students need a little more support, but if we have existing relationships with the community mental health partners, it opens up that avenue to access those resources all the more efficiently and get students the help they need when they need it. So moving on here, another local resource that I really want to highlight and encourage everybody to check out is the North Country Education Services. And specifically, they have a collaborative called the North Country Partnership for SEL Practices. They have been partnering with a bunch of different agencies. They provide resources for professional development from providers such as Lynn Lyons and also the Leslie Institute for Trauma Sensitivity. But they also have created this fantastic document. There's a screenshot of it here with the competencies for self-awareness. But the document is titled SEL Competencies, Strategies, and Practices from Birth Through Adulthood. So they really break down SEL into developmentally appropriate strategies and indicators. So, you'll know when your 18 to 24-month-old has developed self-awareness because they'll be able to do the things listed here. And it's a really tangible and accessible tool to help you check and make sure that your SEL initiatives are in line with what's developmentally appropriate for your age group that you're working with. So I can't highlight this resource enough. It's great. Just like we have competencies for math and ELA, competencies for social emotional learning are just crucial. Two other local resources that I want to highlight. The New Hampshire Children's Behavioral Health Collaborative offers work groups, online trainings, tons of different resources that they link. Their online trainings encompass topics such as children's mental health and family-driven and youth-guided practice. The other resource on this slide, the Family Resource Center, I was going to ask my colleague Lisa, who has a professional relationship with them, if you could share a little bit about this resource.
Thanks for the question, and thank you also for letting me talk a little bit about a Family Resource Center or an FRC. So first of all, if you don't know where your local Family Resource Center is, just go online and Google Family Resource Center New Hampshire, and you'll come up with a beautiful overview page. There are probably more than, I'd say, 60 or 70 scattered across New Hampshire, all the way up in Coos to all the way down at the southern part of the state. But basically the mission of these family resource centers is to provide comprehensive services to parents or caregivers and their children, beginning at pregnancy and going all the way through age 18. So some of the services include parent training, They might have a drop-in center, substance abuse prevention programs, mental health, culturally sensitive issues. They promote general well-being and self-sufficiency to families, regardless of the definition of families. The family resource centers are, again, hungry to work with districts and schools. So if you have any questions, reach out to me and I can point you to your family resource center, and they are going to be ready to jump in and provide any resources that they can to you and your families.
Thank you so much for that overview of the Family Resource Center. It sounds like a great resource for everybody out here in New Hampshire. So moving on to another local resource is the University of New Hampshire Professional Development and Training Center. So they offer tons of different professional development opportunities for you to earn some CEUs. This one here is titled Empathy, a Cornerstone of Social Emotional Learning. I do want to highlight that this course in particular is aiming to be in person. So like we talked about earlier, and Lisa highlighted as well, in person is great. And if we're able to do it safely, that's fantastic, but we do want to be thinking about how we can adapt it to be virtual. So before signing up for something like this, you may want to reach out and ask how it can be adapted to be virtual or hybrid should the need arise. Another local resource that I want to highlight and that we've used here at the New Hampshire Department of Education is Dr. Cassie Yackley. She is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to social emotional learning and implementing in schools. She provides external resources here on this page that I've screenshotted, but she also provides her own keynote presentations. She provides brief foundational trainings and more intensive long-term ongoing training sessions in terms of social emotional learning. And she also brings into it brain development, which I think is a really important aspect when it comes to social emotional learning, thinking about how you can access your social emotional skills at different levels of brain activity. And now moving into national resources, one resource that I really want to highlight is CASEL. We've talked about them earlier. They are the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. They have a ton of different resources virtual on their website. This right here are their new professional learning modules. They partnered with the American Institute for Research to adapt Washington State's professional learning modules here for everybody. So if you click this link, you'll find that you can go on and register for these modules and take all of them from the comfort of your home or office. They're all virtual and there for you to access. CASEL has also created a national roadmap. They partnered with 40 different partners to create a roadmap of how to reopen. This is targeted more for school leaders and district leadership teams, but it encourages the planning that needs to be taken when we're thinking about reopening schools with an SEL framework and an SEL lens. So this document is intended to not only help you plan, but also reflect on what you've done in the past and how you can improve upon it too. And the final CASEL resource that I'll highlight are their weekly webinars. They have different sessions that they come to you live weekly, but then they also have them here, just like we do on YouTube. They have them kind of archived for you to go back and watch at your leisure, and they have the slides there as well. Another national resource that I'd like to highlight is the Aspen Institute. They're a commission on social, emotional, and academic development, and they provide resources multiple times a day. This will be a great way to infuse SEL into your professional kind of vernacular. They have lots of different leadership and SEL brain development type of topics that they cover. And it's a great way to just kind of expand your knowledge and understanding of social emotional learning and all the aspects that it affects in terms of development. And now thinking about more online resources, I wanted to highlight the Center on the Developing Child. They are at the Harvard University. They have tons of resources. I encourage you to check their website out and peruse through some of their different resources and articles. But I wanted to really highlight this recording of a podcast. It's from the Brain Architects, and it relates to social emotional learning and regulation and the support of adults in a child's life. This particular podcast that I linked to you talks about how everyone within a community plays a role in children's development. So I thought it really closely aligns with the New Hampshire's reopening guidelines that encourage schools and districts to reach out to community. Another national resource is the Child Mind Institute. They have tons of webinars that you can choose from. This is a screenshot of their catalog of webinars. I found it really beneficial, not just for social emotional learning, but thinking about educator wellness. They talk about educator stress reduction and all these types of mindfulness strategies that are helpful to everyone. When we're thinking about supporting the transition back to school, we know that everybody has been through a lot. So we want to make sure that these resources and webinars are available for everyone. Our second to last resource that I'll highlight is the National Resilience Institute. And again, the screenshot you'll see here is titled Helping the Helper. They have a ton of different resources. They're surrounding the topic of resilience. But when you're thinking about social emotional learning, you're developing social emotional skills to develop a resilient learner. So a lot of these strategies and a lot of these webinars that they offer are in direct alignment with SEL and SEL competencies. The National Resilience Institute offers a free resource library. They have summit trainings and workshops too. So you can find lots of different resources there. And the final national resource that I'll highlight is the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network. They have a ton of different virtual resources, and then they have their own upcoming events in person and online. And I just want to highlight that they specifically tailored a lot of their content to COVID-19 right now, but they're constantly changing out their resources. So be sure to check in. They spotlight SAMHSA and other school mental health resources. So a great resource for you to check out when you're thinking about developing your professional development for SEL. So I know that was a lot of resources for social emotional learning and professional development. I want to encourage you to, take the time to look through some of these links that my colleagues have so kindly put in the chat, and we'll also make this PowerPoint available to you to access these links as well. And I will also want to encourage you to tune back in. We're going to be live on Thursday to talk about supporting students, family, and educator wellness for social emotional learning. So I thank everybody for tuning in today. And I want to thank my colleagues for also joining me to talk about social emotional professional development. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Molly, thank you for those resources. I know you're a Harvard grad here, so put in a plug that when Molly shares a resource, you can be sure it's a great resource, and you'll be so glad you followed up and actually clicked on one of those links that Catherine is making available. So Molly, thank you for those excellent resources. I know that after you shared them with us, I went because I wanted to look at what some of them really were. So thank you.
I agree. And I just wanted to say there was a minor lapse in the link sharing due to a teleworking emergency, but I will make sure that we get those missed links into the comments. So
awesome. Thank you guys so much, and have a great afternoon.
All right.